Alright, welcome to another Draft Physics video presentation. I did that welcome thing again. Ew. Uh, yeah, screw that. It's science, fuckers. Anyway, do some comments and then maybe some more Suskine, more uh, pointing out how this game is over. Okay, the truth is now revealed. The magic trick is now exposed. So we don't have to play this game that the two-slit experiment is the cornerstone of anything, because it's not remarkable after all. Anyway, thanks for the video, DraftScience. I think this guy trolled my account. Yes, trolls are just horrible things. We should have a law against it, blah, blah, blah. Great video, blah, blah, blah. I have to say you're doing a great job. Nerves of steel, whatever. I've been saying it's light pressure. It shouldn't be one word, I don't think. That causes rest of forces what depends of... Nope. I don't know what that is. Depends of filtering material, example, magnet filters, magnetic properties, and so on. Thank you. That was... I don't know what the hell that was. I'm glad you've been saying it, I suppose. I don't know. Thank you for doing real logging. I guess I'll read the rest of it since I started. I shouldn't have even started. And explaining this. It's critical to understand subject words. Yeah, it would be nice if he did that. And meanings. Yes, that would be good. Example, talking about light. Word wave won't get you to real function. Well, I mean, it could, but not the way they draw it. Anyway, of the subject, and don't explain phenomenon accurately. Well, the point is they don't have evidence for what they assert to be the truth, and none of us can see any of this stuff, so all of it's unfalsifiable in some sense. You're just trying to come up with a model that makes sense. Let's sit there and say, okay, I get it. Okay, it's not gremlins. Somebody actually had a hole in their pocket and their keys fell out and it landed in a certain location. Draw a picture of it. No three bears, no gremlins, no Sasquatch, no UFOs. None of that stuff needed to explain what the hell's happening. Alright, a lot of those people I'd relate to snake oil salesmen. Yeah, I wouldn't. Because it's a kind of snake oil salesmen are kind of smart and clever and tricky. And these guys aren't all that clever or smart or tricky. They're just stupid. They're dupes. Okay, they're just reading their Bible, and they think their Bible is so special, and the little Jesus story is so much fun. The little wave particle duality. And yes, I'm going to trivialize it because that's all it is. It's that trivial. They fell in love with a silly little fable, and they think the world actually works that way. Eesh. And they are in a panic and never learn. I don't know if they're in any panic yet. I mean, the 200 views on my videos is not scaring anybody. So yes, they'll never learn until they're forced to. And unfortunately, there's no mechanism to force. There's no top-down intelligence, unfortunately, or top-down integrity. The physicists are, as I've pointed out and proven, essentially, they are cowards. Okay, I mean... they come on this channel now and then, do a little snarky comment, but when challenged, they have no guts. They'll take on the flat earthers, and the religious kooks, but they won't come anywhere near an argument about just how wacky their physics is, just how full of fucking shit they have been, and how they're just getting away with just talking out of their ass. Just making up truth. The expansion, the non-expansion, the contraction, it's just all bullshit. Barely evidenced. Closed-minded liars. Well, some of them are. The trolls in particular. Alright. I've reached for my mouse at least 3 times to close that window. Yes, that was kind of foolish of me. Sorry about that. I have to watch what's going out to the public. Yeah, and I wasn't watching. I should probably smoke less weed. Well, you should probably do that anyway, because frankly, life is serious business, and this whole recreational distraction crap where I'm just going to do my escapism thing is just kind of a cop-out. There's so much at jeopardy here. There's a little mouse right now in some laboratory having an ear sewn on his ass. And he'd like it if maybe you could give a damn now and then. And, he'd appreciate, somebody caring about the fact that he's being tortured for some stupid purpose to save the human race. And what's the human race doing? Getting stoned, So I'm just saying, you're kind of insulting all the misery that goes on this planet by saying, oh, it's just a fun ride. I'll just sit there and smoke pot and pretend I don't have to worry about anything and, play with myself. Yes, you can do that, a certain amount of time in your life, but it's got to be in proportion, I guess, is everything in moderation, fuckhead. Has Gary covered black holes recently? I don't know why I would waste my time on it, but I have covered the subject in the sense that, look, there's something really simple about this whole crap to understand, okay? That we know the traditional function of an atom is this idea that, oh, it's a big thing with a bunch of empty space in it, right? So the idea is we know that these nucleuses are made out of these protons, electrons, right? So we got that part down, and then the little electron, we know that's that, and then this neutron thing, which is, technically it's not neutral for any other reason than it has both a plus and a minus. It has an electron and a proton, so it's really all the same thing, protons and electrons. This is the universe, materially. So what you're really saying is how much space does that stuff take up? So the hydrogen atom is this, all right, proton, electron. The neutron is the same thing, right? So the complication comes in and just saying, well, how much space does it take up? Now we know a hydrogen atom, molecular hydrogen, floats. I mean, it goes up, okay? Hindenburg, the humanities kind of thing, right? It's a floatable gas. So that arrangement of, proton and electron must mean it still has a lot of space in it, right? So the electron is, say, this far away, and then there's another proton, say, here, and then another electron here. Can you see that far? Well, you can't quite. I'll put the electron over here. All right, so you have this kind of arrangement, proton. So it's still kind of big in taking up space. But if you had it in the form of neutron, right? Neutrons, the electrons are really close, right? So you have the proton and the electron. And then you could have them packed this way where the proton's over here and the other electron is over here. So the electrons are as far apart and protons, they balance out each other's presence. And you can see this takes up less space. So this sinks, right? So the hydrogen atom floats. The neutron atom, you could say, if I put a bunch of neutrons together, we can call them hydrogen. If I smash the hydrogen, I can make neutrons. The neutron thing would sink because it'd be really dense, really, really dense. So you can make a whole bunch of this stuff, right? And call that a neutron star. And you'd say, gee, that could have a lot of gravity because it's got a lot of density and it doesn't have a bunch of this empty space in it, right? Less empty space. So, but that's how you can think about it. There's nothing else you can do, okay? This nonsense that somehow I can put the proton here and I can put the electron on top of it and I can put another proton on top of it and I can put another electron on top of it. You can't do that shit. So all there is getting this stuff closer together. There's no such thing as piling it all in one piece of little chalk dot there. That's the weight of 4 million galaxies. No, you can't do that shit. It's just nonsense. And so yeah, you can make something that has a lot of gravity. But the consequences, like if they had any of these real black holes, right? This is where their physics is so, it's so obviously unthought out. Oh, it's black and you can't see it. No, but the dodge would be that this thing is supposed to have mega gravity, right? So it's mega gravity. Well, then it would be bending light by their own theory all over the friggin' place. There'd be light getting bent from like this galaxy over here, come over here and go, oh, it'll get all bent right to us. So it'd be seeing light from all kinds of locations being bent by the stupid thing. And so we'd see a whole bunch of wrong light from the rest of the universe coming from that thing. So, the theory, it says one thing and then it says another thing that's in direct contradiction. So we don't have any evidence of these little bent light wells. So until they get a picture of the bent light, isn't it all kind of horse shit? You can't take it too seriously. Ugh. But who cares? It's really not physics. All that galactic crap is not physics. Okay, physics, there's only one universe. It's the little one. It does everything. The electrons and the neutrons and the little energy forcey thing are all there is. The rest of the horse shit rises out of that. Oh, shit. Alright, don't know what this means. Damn it. How did I miss that one? I don't know what that means. Okay. Jerry. Idiot. Moron. Fucktard. There was another question, wasn't there? No. Okay. Yeah, here's another one. Alright, we'll do this one first. Yeah, we already did this novice one. Okay. What happens when photons hit a magnet? The same thing that happens when they hit anything else. I mean, it's a piece of material. It has atomic structure. The fact that it behaves as a filter to things that aren't photons, right? I mean, everything acts to photons differently than it acts to, say, heat or some other thing. I mean, I could throw heat at something and the same rules of refraction and diffraction don't take place. It usually just absorbs the heat. So if I throw energy at something, it depends on what the energy, the form it's in. So if it's not in a coherent form, it's heat. Okay, it's little bits. And but if I do throw it at these certain frequencies, that affects the crystals of the material, the domains, if you want to call them that. And it causes the ability to, you can transmit the photon or you can reflect the photon, all these kind of things. Well, a magnet is still made out of atomic structure. Now, the fact that the atoms are lined up, that is, they all have their little plusy sides going one way and their little minus signs going the other way, the fact that they can have a geometrical alignment doesn't change the fact that they're still going to reflect light just like any other thing and reflect heat and all these other things. They're still a physical metallic structure. And that's why magnets fail when they're put in the atmosphere of a charge, is because they end up doing what charges do, which is twist the surface atoms. And now the magnet can't be a filter because you clogged the filter. You've blocked the filter. And so it's no longer going to do its magnet thing. But yeah, it doesn't change anything. The same rules apply. Energy not at a frequency ends up usually getting absorbed as heat. Alright, so Dave said, apparently they don't bounce back. Now, that doesn't make much sense, right? If they don't, then how do I see the magnet? Wouldn't it be invisible if they don't bounce back? They get absorbed and give rise to metastable state. Whatever that is, metastable state. Yeah, no, sorry, that's not even close either. God help me if I'm wrong. Yeah, well, I don't even know why you did that, because obviously you didn't think about it very much. Apparently they don't bounce back? I mean, really, you thought magnets were transparent or invisible? Whatever. Thanks. Blah, 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 blah. I think I'll get rid of that. Since I've answered the question, I'll get rid of it. But whatever. Alright, so then on to Jerry. So this is Jerry's last chance. Okay, I'm not putting up with this crap anymore. So you either answer my questions now and then, or we're not going to play. So anyway, the pattern you see with a single, so he's just reading off a Wikipedia page, with the single slit is diffraction. Well, we've already been over diffraction, okay? Diffraction in no reasonable definition of the word has anything at all to do with creating more than one kind of pattern. There's one pattern classically called diffraction, and that pattern is this. That's diffraction. This. Okay? Diffraction isn't a little stuff over here and a little stuff over here and a pattern. A pattern isn't diffraction. I mean, unless you have something that's diffracting, you call each one of these things a diffraction lobe or something, or give them some sort of reason for somebody to say that makes any sense, because it doesn't make any sense. And again, I can play, look, unless you're willing to say overtly on this page, Professor Lewin is an idiot, okay, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So as long as you want to say that, but he'll tell you this single slit has nothing to do with diffraction. It has to do with the fact that it's an interference pattern. And I'm sure some of the other physicists will say that. So as long as you're willing to say they're full of shit, as you say you're crap, okay, unlike what Professor Lewin believes, okay, the pattern you see on the single slit is diffraction. So as long as you're willing to say that, then you can play this idiotic game. But I'm not going to keep repeating the same shit over and over again as you just keep reading from the stupid Bible. I've already countered your Bible. Your Bible is bullshit. You can't use the word diffraction to describe any pattern that exists and just say, well, that's diffraction. No, it's not. Okay, this is diffraction. All right? Something goes in this way and it diffracts to this. All right? That's diffraction. All right? Diffraction isn't creating this. Okay? That's not diffraction. Period. Done. If you don't accept that, then tough, we can't really have a conversation, because you're just making up new definitions for words that have for centuries had one definition. And that's just playing a game that's just unacceptable. This idea that we're just going to change what vocabulary means. All right, so according to Huygens' principle, so now we're back to this crap. So I make this simple point. You can't use the word Huygens. You can't say in the single slit, Huygens says, magically two waves pop out of a single slit. Right? And then they interfere with each other. Let's draw this stupid fucking asshole picture again. Huygens says. Well, I never saw Huygens draw that, actually, for a single slit. And obviously Newton wasn't too frickin' impressed if that was Huygens' explanation. The very idea of this idea, see, what they're saying is somehow this flat wave goes in, and it Huygenses. That is, it makes an infinite number of little baby waves. Well, I still don't see how they're going to make this pattern. So it doesn't really explain diffraction at all. You still haven't explained why it goes in straight and it comes out crooked. You haven't explained that at all with your Huygens. Your Huygens. So again, the real challenge for you, this is the question you have to answer. If a single slit, according to Huygens, creates two waves, then why doesn't a double slit create four waves? Now, you either answer that question or you're blocked. That's your challenge. Why does Huygens' principle mean this when you're doing a single slit, and Huygens' principle means this when you're doing the double slit? Something completely different. Why does Huygens completely change as a principle when you go from one slit to two slits? Answer that question or just fuck off. Alright. Continuing. Alright. Huygens' principle, every point of the wavefront can have an infinite number of wavefronts. So we're supposed to believe there's infinite stuff inside this small little slit. A little infinite number of infinite little things are happening, and that's good physics. You get a pattern even with a single slit, okay, right, because you try to squeeze a big wave through a tiny hole. Now does that make any sense to anybody? This photon wave that's big, it goes through the hole and somehow it changes, but it can't use friction like water. Water, we know the explanation for why the wave comes out round. It's because of friction. What do you have for an explanation? Oh, that's right, absolutely nothing rational. No mechanism at all, no reason to believe the flat wave turns into a round wave, no reason to believe it's two waves with a single slit and it's only one wave with the double slit. No reasoning applied at all. Okay. Squeeze a big wave through a tiny hole. It breaks up into smaller waves. Oh, as many as you want? I thought it was just 2. Okay, that interfere with each other. Yeah. Well, how come it doesn't happen with the double slit? Only 2 waves come out. Same size opening. How come there aren't all 2 waves? Oh, there won't be an answer to the question. Because they can't answer the question, because it's an obvious contradiction. Their principle is not applied consistently. They change what the principle means depending on the experiment they're doing. And they still call it a principle, violating the definition of the word principle. Okay, the difference when you open 2 slits is you get an interference pattern. Oh, so this is the difference. The difference is when it's going through a single slit, it's some magically different thing, even though it's 2 waves interfering with each other. I mean, can you make any sense of that? You get the pattern even with the single slit because you try to squeeze a big wave through a tiny hole. I mean, well, how does that make sense? It's an interference pattern. I mean, I showed it the other day. I mean, I could show it again. Right? I could just show it forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And, you know, again, you'll just keep playing this game. I'll just keep playing. I'll just keep reading the Wikipedia page, and that'll prove that's a diffraction pattern. But if I showed you the 2 slit pattern, that's an interference pattern, even though they're exactly the same except for this tiny difference of the middle being brighter. So take away the middle being brighter, and it's the same exact concept. I mean, Professor Lewin is wrong about some things, but he's not wrong about the fact that this is a fucking interference pattern, retard. It's not anything called a diffraction pattern. That's just a pile of crap you made up. And again, if the diffraction happens with the single slit, why doesn't the double slit also diffract then? Why does diffraction stop with the double slit? No more diffraction. How come? No more of this coming out. How come? Oh, man, you're just such a weasel. I mean, after all these videos, to go back to this inane, silly, stupid arguments, you know, that have been dealt with over and over and over again. All right, anyway, let's just, okay. The difference between 2 slits and interference pattern. This is caused by 2-point sources. So 2-point sources, there's only 1-point source in the single slit then. I mean, you know, you just can't make any sense, can you? No, you can't. Right? And let's understand, we already have discovered, we've already demonstrated clearly that it's a fact beyond dispute. All right? It's just a fact that through all this horse shit, finally I have found the right answer to the simple question, what's causing the effect? And the cause of the effect is the slit surfaces. So whether you're doing a single surfaces, whether you're doing a single slit, or you're doing a single impediment, all that matters are the surfaces. The surfaces dictate the geometry. So you'll see the surfaces revealed in the math. So the math understands that these are 2 surfaces, and then these are 2 surfaces. And I've had even more slits, I could just say these are 2 surfaces. And it's the geometry of these surfaces, this geometry, okay, of the surfaces, that dictates the size of where the light goes. So this is the envelope in the 2 slit experiment. This is creating this thing. And then this is creating little tiny ones. And this one would create even smaller ones, even tinier. Because the length of the lines and the notches on the lines, in a sense, get more numerous the longer the line is and more tight. And so you can get to more, you turn on and off more times. The further away you are, the tiniest movement makes a change in where the light goes. So with a laser beam, I can move the light a tiny bit of distance. You know, I move the light a tiny bit of distance, I move it across a huge amount of distance, depending on the angle at which I do that at. So I go through many more wavelengths. Over here, 1 inch equals 500 wavelengths, where here 1 inch only equals 20, and here 1 wavelength equals 2. You know, that's, I should just say 200, 20 and 2. So the number of wavelengths your angle is deciding how much stuff you're capable of moving through, how many wavelengths. So the wider the slits, the more wavelengths you're able to go through with a tiny angle change. But anyway, that's all that it is. That's it. So the experiment is understood. The envelope pattern is being created by these two slits. They're doing this. These two slits are doing this inside of it. And they're doing it by sending the light to all these locations. They're diffracting it, you could say. They're sending it to all these locations, a little bit more to the center than to the rest. And they're both doing that same thing. They're sending light photons to every single location. And the simple truth is they're sending pieces of photon. And in some places you'll combine the pieces. Their phase will combine and you'll make a photon. And in some places they won't combine, they'll be out of phase, and therefore you won't be able to make a photon. And that's all you're deciding. And it's that simple. And you're just stupid. Belligerently stupid. Okay, diffraction when it's an infinite amount of point sources. So again, this is caused by 2 point sources, unlike diffraction where you have an infinite amount of point sources. So an infinite amount of point sources does not work for single slits. You can't make an infinite number of point sources and make the pattern out of that unless you cut it in 2 somehow. Unless you come up with some fake notion that I'm just going to pretend I have an arbitrary center of the slit, and I'm going to just pretend that everything on one side cancels with everything on the other side, and I'm just going to leave that point they put in the center. You have a fake mechanism for cutting the slit in half, and it doesn't matter because you don't apply the same principle to the double slit. If it happens in the single slit, why don't you have it happen in the double slit? Obviously, it's not a consistently applied principle. All right. I think the teacher just made it simple. So this is another excuse. The physics professors, okay, are making it simple. Oh, except when they do their math. There's no urgency to be simple at all. But yes, of course, when they draw it, they have to turn it into complete crap. I mean, it's just a silly explanation. These are real phenomena. Again, it's their cornerstone experiment. Their entire quantum mechanics is based on this silly phenomenon, and their silly understanding of it or interpretation of it, and and they're allowed to be preposterously inaccurate. They're allowed to draw it wrong, to put words in Newton's mouth that he didn't speak, and to cite experiments that were never performed. That's all okay because they're teachers. It's okay for teachers to tell fake stories. I mean, what an excuse maker. Okay, he wasn't talking about diffraction. He says the word, I think, in the video, but clearly the other professors I've played have clearly said it. And when they draw diffraction, they just draw the hump. That's what they call the hump, not the pattern I've shown. So again, the fact that they can't draw the single slit as it actually is performed, right? So I'll show the image again. This is the single slit. It isn't some like, oh, there's a big hump, and then there's little tiny humps, and that's it. We're done. Yeah, obviously not the pattern. But it's okay. They can completely distort the reality because they're teachers. Oh, this is so pathetic. All right. He wasn't talking about diffraction. In any case, he wasn't talking about diffraction, whatever that means. In any case, it proves even more that light has wave-like properties. So again, they just keep saying the thing like, you didn't prove anything. You didn't demonstrate anything. You haven't made a rational counter-argument to a single fucking thing I've said. Your theory is crap. It's not fucking rational, and it's not consistently applied. Your principles, it's a pile of shit, and you have responded to nothing. You just keep reciting and regurgitating the Bible. God said. I don't care what God said. Let's see what you can demonstrate. And you can't demonstrate a single piece of evidence. And I can demonstrate lots of evidence that you're full of shit. And that Susskind is full of shit. So I'm going to play him again. because he's full of shit. So I did play a little further into the trolls video, but he just talks over Susskind through this whole part. So I'm going to play this part because it's back to this stupid argument again that I think I've already demonstrated. The evidence is not on your side, you liars. So it's, yeah, there's the Veritasium image. All right, so we'll play from here. But, you know, this is just counter the arguments that have been made. I've shown you the real experimental data. I mean, this is where the experiment is actually done. I guess it's this page. No, that doesn't look like it either. It must be down this way. It must be here. There it is again. Okay, I mean, they did the covering of the slit. They go across the screen. You see the blob. You don't have any hard darks anymore. No hard darks between any of these little blobs. So obviously there isn't 0 photon here and 0 photons here and 0 photons here and 0 photons here. There's no zeros there. Oh, I did it again. Yeah, Jesus. Sorry. Yeah. Gotta remember not to do that. All right, so back to Susskind is here. Yes, okay.
Well, first of all, what is this figure? This figure is a probability distribution, and it tells you...
So just more crap language, right? There's a probability distribution for everything. I throw this piece of chalk, there's a certain likelihood of how straight I can throw it, and how, you know, perfectly and all that kind of stuff. And if we do it 100 times, there'll be a certain distribution of where the chalk went. And so what? We know it didn't happen because there was some magical randomness that took place. We know it's going to be in the variation in which I throw it, and how it hits, and how many times it spins, and all kinds of things are going to decide where the outcome is. It's not some fucking probability distribution. It's a reality distribution. It's a interact with the physical universe that exists distribution.
The horizontal axis here tells you what the probability of a photon getting to a particular point at a particular height here. But in particular, it says that there are no photons which arrive at that point.
Right, it says. Okay, so if we look at the actual experiment conducted, that's not the results. So I just showed you the one image. I mean, I can show that again. Okay, there it is. There is no 0 here. There is no 0 here. There is no 0 here. And I can show you the Veritasium version, right? It should be here somewhere. There it is. Now, obviously, he did the experiment. Originally I said, where did all this noise come from, right? Because he just picked up all these noise. I said, okay, it's just noise, I guess. But there really shouldn't be any noise. It's a $7,000 machine. I think it's capable of having 2 slits that don't have cracks in them or something. So this noise didn't come from nowhere. This noise is the signal. So clearly the light is still there, and all you're doing is adding more. And you're adding more because you're combining broken pieces. So as I've attempted to point out, is that if you understand the photon is broken by the process of interacting with the slits, and the pieces of photon are going to the different locations, they're being scattered to the different locations from the point sources, and the point sources that work mathematically are the surfaces. Okay, these are the point sources. Well, you can understand that if I only have 2 of these sources by blocking one of the slits, that if these were parts, I only have 2 possible routes from which to get pieces. I can only get pieces from part stores here and a part store here, and that's it. And so I have to make photons out of just those 2 sources. But if I open the other slit, I have 2 more sources, and that's really huge in the sense that I have 2 more places to get parts from. And so now I have a much higher likelihood of making a new photon. I have a much higher, not twice as high, but maybe 4 times as high chance of making a photon now because I have 2 more sources of parts. And the parts could just be A's, B's, C's, and D's, right? So it doesn't matter what the parts are, but yeah, those are the kind of parts I have at each place. And obviously when I only have two sources, I might not be able to make an A, B, C, D. But I can make an A, B, C, D. The more sources I have, the more likely it is I'm going to make an A, B, C, D combination is going to be made. And that's how much the likelihood improves the more sources of parts I have. Alright, so we've dealt with that.
There are no photons which arrive at that point.
Right. So he's saying this, why? Because he did the experiment? No. Because we have a video of a 1950s guy doing the experiment? No. Because if they have any evidence at all proving it? No. But this is their cornerstone experiment. Their cornerstone experiment through which they deduced all this crap. And know what really happened? This is this is how obviously silly the whole thing is. Right, so Newton did all his experiments, right? He figured out the two inside surfaces. He did that experiment, the single slit. He did the single impediment, that is the two outside. So he kind of got the idea that this happens no matter which way the surface is facing. But he didn't think to put two slits together, apparently. So in 1801, this young guy does it for the express purpose of just explaining wave theory. So he doesn't do the single slit. He just shows the double slit, because he can draw that nice little wave interference pattern and say, look, it's got to be a wave. So they all fell for it, and they said, oh yeah, two slits make waves. And they didn't realize that the single slit made the same pattern. And so now they were in trouble, because now they went back and looked at a single slit and said, hey, look, it does it too. How do we explain that? That doesn't make any sense. The two wave thing makes sense, but how do I make the one wave thing interfere with itself? That doesn't make sense. And that's when they got into all this trouble. And then they never realized, oh, there's two patterns. There's an envelope in the double slit experiment. Oh, and so they're just caballing excuses for why their assumption is correct. So it's like Benjamin Franklin getting plus and minus wrong, and there was probably a whole bunch of people for years trying to keep making it work like it was the right answer. And instead they just built their physics on top of the wrong answer. And so now they have current going the opposite direction of voltage in a wire, merely because they assigned plus and minus wrong.
There are no photons which arrive at that point. This is odd.
So again, he's saying it as if he's seen it, they've proven it, they've demonstrated it, they did it, when there's no evidence that when this video was made he had any clue that it had ever been done, that he ever saw. He didn't see this experiment, obviously. I could go back to this one. He didn't see this and say, oh shit, that really isn't a dark spot, is it? He didn't see Veritasium's video. He didn't see this. Oh, that's not really zero, is it? That's a lot more than zero, is it? Oh yeah, that's a lot more than 0 photons. Maybe I shouldn't keep saying it's zero when it's not zero. So there's no mystery here. No light disappears when you open the second slit. What happens is you have a whole lot more parts. So now there's some locations where the phase is right, you'll remake a lot more photons. And that's all. You just add more photons. You don't subtract any.
Odd.
That's what the two experiments I showed clearly demonstrate. And Veritasium isn't an idiot. I mean, if Veritasium had a chance to demonstrate a real zero here, he would love to have done it. He would have loved to have made the argument. See, look at that. When one slit's open, he would have done the cover one slit at a time. That $7,000 device he was using to do this experiment actually has a thing where you can close one slit at the time. You don't think he'd want to show us that? He'd sit there and say, look, I can make it zero here. Oh. All I did was close the slit. If he could get the thing to do it, he would have done it. But he couldn't get it to do it because it doesn't work that way. It's not the truth.
If you opened only one hole, then you would find a probability distribution which wasn't zero. In other words, you would find illumination at that point. You open the other hole, you still find illumination at that point. You open both holes, and all of a sudden, no photon gets to that point.
Right. So he's just saying it. He has no good reason to believe it except, well, it makes this theory make more sense, and it makes their jump to their conclusion make more sense. But if they had gone the right order, if they had looked at the single slit pattern first, and then tried to understand what was happening in the single slit, then they could have got the right answer here. Because they could have understood that, yes, this is just breaking photons. Photons have a huge polarization. Going through the slit means they're getting broken. The broken means that the pieces of photon are going to these locations, and where do you reconstruct a photon? So this isn't about constructive and destructive interference. It's just about breaking photons and then remaking photons. Reconstruction, not construction, reconstruction. And it works for the polarizing films. That's the right answer. And this crap is that. It's crap. It doesn't make any sense. It's wooey nonsense. It's illogical, but it's the whole foundation for all the woo in physics.
Even though,
I mean, it's not the whole fact. Like I said, they went for bent space, which was just too silly an explanation. So I mean, the jumping to the silly answer was something physics was really in the mood to do in the early 1900s, and they just did it all over the place.
they're coming through once every 20 minutes or once every 20 years, and therefore, how can they know about each other?
Yeah, they don't.
Nevertheless, if you open both holes, there will be places where no photons can get to, despite the fact that photons arrived at those points.
So he asserted it again, and it's just not a fact. He'll never make that experimentally true. It's only a delusion in his head, because he didn't think about it. He was just reading the Bible. The quantum Bible says so. But that's all that says so. There's no evidence the quantum Bible is correct. There's no evidence that that assumption was correct. Nothing. It's wrong. It's just somebody made a wrong assumption. So, wow, isn't that bizarre? When they never really did the experiment, they just speculated that that's the truth. They looked at the pattern and just said, oh yeah, well, where there's those, filled in lines, those are really dark lines, because our math says so. And this is just a bad image. Yeah, it's just a blurry image, and so that's why we don't see the real dark line there, it's because it's just a blurry image. No, it's not just a blurry image. It's a consequence of the actual physics. Alright, so play a little more.
The same
Whoops, wrong one. The same interference pattern, right? Except it's on top of a whole bunch of photons.
When only one hole was open. That is, you might be able to sit down and work up some interesting but rather elaborate mechanism to make this.
No, you can come up with something dirt simple. There's electrons on the surface of the slit, and the electrons are scattering the light just like they do everywhere else. And if you understood a photon to be a composite object, that is, it's made of more than one bit, that's why it has a length, because it's a ray, then yeah, you could understand that the photon could still have all of its energy getting through, but it's out of phase. Yeah, because every time it hits an electron, or it's either out of phase because the photons are from different times and they start off out of phase, or it's out of position in the sense you send the bits to all kinds of different locations. Now you have to reconstruct photons out of parts from different stores. I mean, that's another way of thinking about it. Just thinking about the stores being a place where all the pieces are all at these stores. So you had 5 cars. You broke the cars into pieces, and then you put them in these stores randomly, 4 different stores randomly. So you take all the pieces from 5 cars, put them at 4 different stores. And now you can really understand how I need those other 2 stores, or every car I put together it's going to be missing something. And the only way I can put together all of the 5 cars is I have to get it from all of the sources.
happen. You could imagine elaborate, complicated mechanisms where somehow
This matter has electrons around it, like we already understand, that the surface of the material is a real thing, and it's going to, if it can block photons, then yes, it can break photons on its edges. I mean, it's an opaque surface. It's not some irrelevant surface. It's not some microscopically imperceivable surface. No, it's a real surface, and it has a real edge.
screen
And there's real electrons on the edge.
here, some degrees of freedom inside the screen. Remember how many photons went through, and they remember what the...
No memory required. So again, this is just like the Feynman crap about the top of the top surface of the glass having to know what the bottom surface is doing, or vice versa. When of course they're going to know what each other's doing, because they're made out of atoms, and all the atoms are stacked on top of each other, and they know that all the other atoms exist. There's no not knowing what the other atoms are doing.
supposed to do, but it would be a rather elaborate mechanism.
I mean, if I put you in a crowded room and then I shove another person in the room, all the people in the room know another person got in the room, right? They're not sitting there saying, "Oh, did something change?" Yeah, of course it changed, because there's all of a sudden more pressure. They're going to know it.
Just for this one purpose, this phenomenon of interference, of destructive interference. This is called destructive interference.
And again, let's understand, it is not destructive interference. Nothing was destroyed here. You just added more somewhere else. So all you did was constructively reconstruct more in these locations than you did here. Because here you had the pieces and the phase. Here you didn't have the phase right. So where there's peaks, that means you have the pieces plus the right phase. Here you have the pieces but not the right phase. And that's the difference.
That the probabilities cancel instead of adding at certain points. That's a very generic property.
Yes, it's a very generic. It's a very interesting, and if it was a fact, this would be, wow, that's really bizarre, right? How does photons not go where they were going? What changed the path of the photon? How did it know the other slit was closed? It's not a fact, so it doesn't have to. We don't have to have a wooey explanation. You've misinterpreted. You've created a gremlin that was completely unnecessary. All you have to do is sew the hole in your pocket. No gremlins were involved.
In quantum mechanics. And so it requires a kind of explanation which is not some detailed, mechanical, complicated explanation.
Right. Instead, it's just a big bag of God. God did it. It's all. It's just a silly, non-real, unmechanical, unrational pile of crap explanation. The wooicles are wooing.
It requires a broad, new idea about how statistics works and about how the logic of
Magical randomness works. It's magically random, probabilistically.
of quantum mechanics works. So that's the first really weird thing that happens in quantum mechanics.
Okay, so let's understand. It's not really weird once you understand. So once you say, okay, photons get broken, photons are remade, then it's not weird at all. It's not difficult at all. Once you understand that the envelope pattern is clearly created by these two slits, and that the little bars are being created by this distance. Mathematically, that makes sense. This big distance creates small pattern. This small distance creates big pattern. Once you understand that, the whole pattern becomes kind of obvious and easy to explain, and it makes perfectly good sense. No mystery if they just explained it correctly. But because they're incapable of explaining it correctly, it always seemed a mystery. So that's, I spent years looking at this stuff and not being able to get the right answer because I was confused by their misinterpretations and misdescriptions of the actual experimental data. They keep misdescribing it, and therefore you say, well, yeah, that is and no, it isn't, because they're not describing it accurately. They keep telling you the point sources are here where the waves would be. But mathematically you find out, no, they're here where the surfaces are. Alright. So I don't know if there's anything more on that. So we'll play a little bit of the shithead. This is, so he talked over Susskind saying, the part of the video I just played, he just talked over the whole section. So he didn't even say anything on that subject any further.
Clump together, and that accounts for the forces.
So he keeps doing this thing, though, that somehow my theory is somehow more unfalsifiable than their theory. So they can say things like bent space, dark matter, dark energy, entanglement. They can say things about all these things that are completely unviewable. You can never say the field doesn't exist. I can't say that the antiparticle doesn't exist, right? It's all unfalsifiable claims, and yet they'll point to somebody's challenging theory and say it's unfalsifiable, therefore I don't have to pay any attention. I mean, it's such bullshit. We're both stuck with the same problem. No one can produce a videotape of photons flying through space, and no one's going to ever have a videotape of even an electron doing it. But you can't hit an electron with anything smaller than a photon. It's the smallest thing we have, and we know that one quanta of a photon scatters an electron. It scatters the photon bit, and it also scatters the electron. So we're out of luck. There's no viewing electrons passively. There's no viewing a photon passively. So yeah, any model is going to be unfalsifiable in that sense. But the real competition is, does the model, can you draw it? Is it coherent? And how much does it explain? Do you have to have a different theory to explain magnetism versus gravity, or can you use the same theory? I win in that competition. They catastrophically lose in that competition.
Every 20 minutes, or once every 20 years.
Okay, well, I mean, it's just... Okay. I mean, I should just play the whole thing without talking over it, but
yeah,
I mean, the previous video.
Yeah, you can't play the video without talking over it. Why do you think talking over the video that you're trying to use as proof of something is a great idea, moron? I mean, you've been watching my videos for at least, however long you've been trolling me, 7 years, and you haven't figured out that you're supposed to pause the fucking video? God, he's so dumb.
How this is supposed to work. You can watch this video yourself. It's Lecture 1, Modern Physics, Quantum Mechanics, Stanford. This gentleman is Leonard Susskind. Okay, if you open two holes, no photons arrive at that point. No photons arrive at that point.
All right, so here he does it. He's doing it again. He's in spite of the fact that I've already shown the experiment, in spite of the fact that I've done this over and over again now, cited this and cited this, he just keeps asserting that that's what the truth is. The truth is something counter to this. So this is actually a published experiment, okay? Not an unpublished one. This is a published one. And the Veritasium video is unpublished, but, technically, but clearly using the same instrument, okay, as the other page that had the crappy data, the data that wasn't as clear as this, and clearly had what was, they had a filter on to take out noise, and they considered this signal noise, even though there was no source of that noise, even though it couldn't possibly be noise because it's inside the experiment. It's inside a vessel that can't be creating noise. Just happens to make extra noise? I don't think so. No evidence that that's the truth. So in spite of making these arguments, they just keep asserting it. They just keep saying it and saying it and saying it as if it's a truth. You prove it to be a lie. You demonstrate at least with significant evidence that it's not the truth. And they just keep asserting it.
At that point. No photons arrive at that point. But then when you close this one, you close it, now the only photons are the ones going through here. Suddenly, inexplicably, in real life, okay, so this is in real life, see if I have it here. Yeah, right here.
And I demonstrated, I read 2 inches down from that drawing on the page, or 3 inches, it talks about noise cancellation. It talks about adding something to take out the noise. And I just showed you the Veritasium one. Clearly the two are in huge conflict. So he's just going to keep pretending this is accurate when this is the page talking about using a noise filter, and clearly there was no conversation about a noise filter on Veritasium's video. But he'll just keep saying he wins when obviously I think it's quite obvious that this was noise canceled. And by noise canceling, that means when they were doing this 2-slit part where they go all the way to 0, they had the noise canceling filter on. Ugh, it's just such a despicable hunk of shit.
This is the real data, and I'll post a link. I already posted a link for this.
Right, an unpublished pile of crap by the people who are trying to sell the $7,000 device. And they have a Christian physicist doing a demo. All right, so let's just understand. A Christian physicist associated with a university that graduates 8 on average, 8 students a year. So it's a university that graduates 8 students a year, connected to some not-for-profit business that sells this piece of crap for $7,000. So let's understand that context. Versus Veritasium, who would want in every way to make this actually happen. Veritasium would have loved to get these results. That's not the result he got. That's a demonstrable fact.
He looked at the link and went, "Oh, how do you know that how this experiment?" Like he said, he didn't know how this experiment was done, even though all the methodology was laid out in black and white in the article.
Yeah, right. It was black and white. So let's go to the fucking article again. We'll do it again. I mean, this is just so fucking dishonest. All right, so this is the $7,000 device. Veritasium used the same fucking device. This is the Christian kook. Okay, let's go down the page. Look, it's just cut and dry, blah, blah, blah. We don't see a single image it creates. We don't see a single thing. They didn't photograph anything real here at all. And let's go to an extension right here, right? 3.5 inches below the diagram he's showing. 3.5 inches below, as always, tech spin instruments lend themselves to expanded investigations by injection of a TTL signal. The diode laser can be modulated so that lock-in detection of the photodiode signal becomes possible. Because of the noise reduction of lock-in detection, there you go. Sensitive qualitative measurements of the laser light interference signal can be achieved. How exactly does noise reduction give you more information? Oh, that's right, it doesn't. So that's sort of bullshit, right? It just gives you a prettier drawing. It doesn't give you better information. Leaving the noise in, okay, is the honest way to do the experiment. Taking the noise out is the dishonest way. And clearly in this case, the noise was the signal. So it's right there on your own fucking page if you cared to read it, you stupid dumb troll. Ay. All right. I mean, you know. So yeah, I looked at this data and I said, yeah, what does it mean? There's no way to see exactly how they did this. How they closed one of the slits, and did they close the slits with the filter still on or the filter off? Because I would contend this is not consistent with Veritasium's data. So Veritasium and this are in conflict. How do you resolve that conflict? Do you think Veritasium is dishonest or incompetent? Or do you think these Christian kooks are maybe the problem?
But that requires reading, and reading is like work. So if one slit is open, you get this line here. And these are actual data points. This is not something somebody just drew.
Yeah, it is.
In their own shit on the wall.
Yeah, it is.
Of a padded room somewhere.
Yeah,
Unlike
yeah.
some people we know.
So again, it is something they just drew. We don't really have any evidence how this was drawn at all. So it is just something somebody drew, because there's no evidence of how it was done in the document. The document doesn't document this document.
That maybe that's where they came up with their science theory.
You're cooked, fuckhead. Okay, your little giggling and all your little bullshit doesn't explain, does it? No, you're not gonna. Where did this noise come from, asshole? Where is it? What does this noise represent? Why is this not a zero? 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 Why don't you explain how the instrument malfunctioned and this should have been a zero, but the instrument didn't know how to make it a zero right? Why don't you tell us what the fuck Veritasium did wrong, okay, that he doesn't get zeros here, fuckhead? Alright, so probably enough of a video. There's no point, right? These people, again, this is a religion. They obviously can't accept any criticism. They can't accept any doubt that their God isn't God. They just will not accept that there might be this Mohammed theory that's just as good as your stupid, silly Jesus theory. You know, he's just as much of a savior. He did just as many miracles. You know, and let alone accept that there might be an evolution theory, a simple mechanical mechanism that the whole universe runs on that has nothing to do with any of this wooey crap. I mean, they're obvious religious fanatics for a cause, and they just don't care who. They're inquisitional nonsense. They'll sit there and drown witches and do all kinds of shit because they're just evil, fucking trolly bastards who just sitting there defending a Bible, for fuck's sake. A stupid notion. Physics made some fucking mistakes. Just fess up and say, yeah, it was pretty sloppy fucking physics. The science got sloppy. It didn't bother doing the Eddington experiment a second time. It didn't bother using a satellite in space. It didn't bother doing all these things that it should have fucking goddamn done to verify the assertions it was making. It just didn't bother doing the fucking experiment. And here's the case where Veritasium, I think, paid the $7,000 thinking he was going to get something really great, and he got something insanely mediocre, and then made a wishy-washy video where he couldn't even assert anything. Well, it's like a wave, it's like a particle, it's blah 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 blah. I mean, I played the video, so I mean, I already did this, but I just mean he couldn't make any hard statement at all because, yeah, this was really a mushy result. So, yeah, just you people are just such fucking weasels. Alright, enough. Till the next time and such.